Now then, this was another of my American imports because for whatever reason, like Deep Space Nine itself, the Runabout from Deep Space Nine is not a model that seems to crop up very commonly here in the UK. So this is another Playmates release, just like Deep Space Nine, and this is the Runabout Orinoco. Now, brief bit of Star Trek lore history. The Runabouts as a class of starship, not shuttle, interestingly, and I've done a little bit of research, and I do mean a little bit before starting to film this in some haste. The Runabouts were a starship introduced in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, but they weren't exclusive to Star Trek Deep Space Nine. We did see them later in Star Trek The Next Generation as well, being used as a sort of executive style shuttlecraft in an episode where some of the crew were off the Enterprise, but I think going back to the Enterprise. Now, this is a really sort of interesting ship because this is Deep Space Nine predefined, and the idea behind this was a sort of is a kind of midway ship, if you like, between a large shuttle and a small starship. It has its own warp core, it has micro torpedoes, it has phaser banks. It also has, although we never see it, a sort of detachable cargo section in the middle here. So it's a little bit Thunderbird 2-esque. So it's got the sort of cockpit area in the front, the command deck in the front, and the living quarters in the back. But the warp core is horizontal, going sort of along the spine of the ship and leading out into the warp engines on the outriggers there. Speed-wise, according to what I know of it, warp 5 is a cruising speed, maximum warp 8 if it's got some go faster stripes on the inside. Let's have a look at the box and we'll see what the box says about it, because this might be an example of where they sort of released this before some of the lore in the show had built up around the Runabout, so we might find that it's a little bit different here. So, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Beyond the Final Frontier. I don't even remember that being a tagline for the series, but anyway. Runabout Orinoco, passenger and cargo transport. It could in theory carry cargo. Some pods were supposed to be for cargo, but I don't think we ever really see it being used as that massively. Passenger and cargo transport for Space Station DS9. 2 authentic Runabout sounds, phaser firing and wormhole effect, light up engine nacelles, hinged front and rear hatches, and I'll come back to that. Holds 2 figures inside. Well, okay, spoilers. This is a Playmates starship that can hold Playmates action figures. I don't think I have yet shown you a Playmates design which actually does that, because I'm not sure that any of them have. Yes, they've done it on a tiny scale, but because this is a sort of a shuttle-sized item, but they've done it large, of course that allows them to accommodate action figures inside it, which isn't something we've seen for the larger scale starships, where that just wouldn't really work in a sort of, you know, in a scale sense. So this is actually quite interesting, because this is as close as Star Trek gets to doing kind of Star Wars fighter craft and that sort of thing. This is it. Plus, of course, another item which I will be showing you in due course. We've got technical blueprint included, as is not uncommon. But as I say, I think this is probably a US one, because it's also got this design and alien competition. So I'm pretty sure this is exactly around the same era as Deep Space Nine, because the Deep Space Nine model also included that particular sort of offering, if you like. Actual lights and sounds from the Star Trek Deep Space Nine TV show, highly detailed replica from the hit TV series. So, collector's edition number 44418, I believe. This is what it says on the side, so just a quick sort of repetition of what was on the front, obviously. Don't think that says anything new. Requires 3 replaceable AA batteries. Okay. Haven't found a year yet, but I'm sure we will do. TM and copyright 1994, Paramount Pictures. Okay. Figures sold separately. So it didn't come with any figures, as is often the way with these things, of course, disappointingly. Let me just turn a little bit more lighting on, which I'm hoping won't shine quite so much on the back, so we can see a little bit more clearly what this is actually all about. So let me read the back blurb here. Like all Danube class runabouts, and that is indeed the correct class for these, the Orinoco shuttles, okay, namesake is a great river, as were all the runabouts, the many runabouts that we saw used in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Registered NCC-72905, the Orinoco was assigned to the station following the destruction of the Yangtze Kiang. Like most runabouts, the Orinoco serves the space station as both a passenger shuttle and a short-range cargo ship, frequently running supplies to and from the planet Bajor. The cockpit is home to a 2-person flight crew and up to 2 additional passengers. A special feature on the Runabout Danube-class shuttles is the ability to use a limited-range 2-person transporter automatically without anyone on board. The aft contains living quarters, complete with sleeping bunks and a food replicator. The exterior of this self-contained craft is composed of various alloys, including duranium. With its sleek, functional design, the Orinoco serves the station well. Now, apparently, part of the lore is that they actually created the hangars for the runabouts specifically for the runabout, so they're kind of runabout size. They actually cut them out and sort of created them as part of the Starfleet revamp of the station. Now, I'm not quite sure. I think that came from the Deep Space Nine technical manual. And apparently the ship design itself is actually derived from a Sydney-class ship, which is what the Jenolan that crashed on the Dyson Sphere in Star Trek The Next Generation was. So they kind of took that design and kind of worked on that and used that as a little bit of a basis, along with obviously, you know, prior shuttle designs. So what we've got here is a hinged front hatch, a runabout cockpit. That positioning is curious. I think the windows in the show are probably much lower down, but obviously they've done that for the sake of, you know, this sort of playability. Wormhole activation button, phaser activation button, hinged rear hatch, light up engine nacelles, flight simulating wheels. What? Okay. Oh, I see. So as in, if you want to pretend it's flying, you run it along the surface that it's on. Yeah, got you. Press the phaser activation button to defend against hostile aliens from the Gamma Quadrant and light up engine nacelles. Press the wormhole activation button to light up the engine nacelles and warp ahead for the Gamma Quadrant. You do not fly into the wormhole at warp, probably unless you want a very short journey, but anyway. Lift the hinge front hatch and place figure inside for piloting the Runabout Orinoco on its next mission. Lift the hinged rear hatch and place an additional figure inside to assist in navigating the vessel. Of course, neither of those are particularly a thing because the blurb on the left here, which is nice actually, because that's actually a Deep Space Nine terminal. So they've used like a computer terminal sort of graphic there for that information. The actual cockpit of the runabouts was quite spacious. So you had room for 4 seats. So sort of kind of 2 control seats up front and then 2 other sort of ops seats next to those on the side. And it did also have a transporter in the middle and a replicator, some hand phasers, you know, all sorts of interesting, exciting stuff. The other thing I should say about this, and this is something that this model of it is lacking, is that in the show, the runabouts often had an additional pod mounted here. Those are probably supposed to be the latches for it. So they could sort of clamp on another pod. And that could be a photon torpedo launcher with 4 full-size torpedoes involved, accessible and usable, as against the micro ones that came out the front of the runabout as standard. Or you could have a sensor pod, that sort of thing. So I really liked that because I thought, yeah, I love that because it reminds me of the Reliant, of course. So it's like having a sort of Miranda optional pod on top of a very, very small ship. But that makes perfect sense if you want to create a mission-specific version of the ship. You just add something to it. Great idea, lovely, thought I at the time. Space Station DS9, yeah, that's the other thing available, obviously, in this particular range. So, I don't know if this has ever been out, so this could well be an unboxing. I get the impression it's been retaped. I think someone's probably had this out to have a look at it, and it's been retaped, would be my guess. These are quite neat tapes, but the other ones look like they've been more mangled. I might take these ones off, I think, to get into it for you, because that seems the best way of getting in. And then I'll have a little look at it, and then I'll bob and get some batteries, and we'll see if we're in business. And I suspect this is going to be pretty big. Let's just see what we've got. I think we'll pop it this way. Let's see what we've got. Oh yeah, okay, this is cool. Now I suspect there might even be an original sticker sheet lurking in here if I'm very lucky. I can't immediately see any paperwork. But let's have a look at actually, I can flip her this way. I don't think she's not going to launch herself, because she's actually strapped in still. So that's a good big ship. Ironically, that's easy on a par with some of the much larger ships that Playmates does. Like it's almost like an enterprise scale. I don't immediately have one to compare it with. He says scanning about. Not that I can easily compare it with anyway. No. Okay. Let me just grab this for you though. This will give us an idea of scale, if nothing else. So I would say it's a good sort of 30 centimeters plus. So it's about a foot long. So it's quite large. It's quite large. That's kind of what I was hoping for, and it's kind of what I suspected would be the case, because it's got to be able to fit the action figures in. But I think we're definitely to my mild surprise, I don't think this has been out of the box before. So it looks like I'm into a proper unboxing here in order to get it out. Okay, very nice, very nice. I could do this on camera, but I think I'll skip to the end. There she is, complete with wheels. Funny. Yeah, so there you go. I think reasonably confident this is the first time she's ever been out of the box. So a 30-year-old Runabout. Wow. Okay. Now then, what do I think? I think that there is quite a lot of paneling. I think that you have to apply your own stickers, ladies and gentlemen, because there we are. We have the stickers still in the original packaging, along with the certificate of authenticity and technical blueprints and all of that sort of good stuff. That's all still sealed. Oh no, actually I could extract it fairly easily. Let's extract it for the sake of completion. So yeah, I mean, it's it's a fascinating compromise, this, because again, I've got to keep in mind here, this is not Diamond Select. So if I was expecting an absolutely perfect Runabout, this probably wasn't the thing to buy. Nevertheless, I like the texturing on the I was going to say they're the Buzzard collectors, but they're really not. That's almost something that the Defiant then used as a sort of a texture approach. I'm trying to think what that would constitute, because navigational deflector maybe? Probably not so much. I think it's just more of a general kind of reactor glow that they put on there, because that is sort of part of where the housing and the sort of the warp coils and so on would be. Let's just have a look at the contents of that little bag. So we have some 30-year-old stickers there, which I rather suspect would still work, because they seem to be in absolutely fine condition. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. This is really like space-time archaeology. This really is. Something that I think I've seen before, which is the Star Trek Deep Space Nine Design and Alien Contest entry form. There we are, and I think we saw that with the Deep Space Nine model as well. That was also in the box. And trust me, none of these went missing off toy shelves, or at least not with the Runabout out of them, because this was not easy to get out. It was well tied in and well sellotaped in. You were not getting that out of the box in a hurry, it has to be said. I do love a bit of, I do love a good technical blueprint. There we go. Federation Runabout Exterior View BR87-7. Actually, even difficult to get into the full camera screen here. Hang on. Zunk. So we've got a forward phaser here. We've got shield generators. We've got reactor core, geranium composite shell exterior, a sensor, warp engine nacelles, of which 2 and rear shield generators. Yeah, so pretty much as I mentioned, but you can see here, even ironically, even on their technical blueprint, the cockpit windows here are much lower down. They're more sort of here. So I'm not sure why they opted to put them quite so far back up. I'm pretty sure they should be down here. That, to my mind, is a slight annoyance as an adult, and something which a child probably wouldn't give 2 hoots about. But they don't actually, I'm just having a quick look, but all of the pictures on the box are actually of the toy. They're not of the actual Runabout from the show. So you can't really tell that there's supposed to be a difference. Now, things that will probably come in useful for me in a moment when I'm trying to find out where the batteries go. So there's the instruction sheet, as you can see. So absolutely spot on everything in this. Basically, this is totally complete because it's clearly as it was originally packaged, I would say. Oh, wow. Wow, yeah, and of course. I've got to hand it to Playmates for this. Look at this. They've actually got stickers for the inside of the Runabout. So you can put these on the consoles as L-Cars consoles. And even got sort of little views out the windows and stuff. That's nice. Because that's an extra step. I mean, it makes perfect sense because obviously you would kind of expect to see that. But wow. Okay. Oh, fair dues to them. And there is my certificate of authenticity, if there were any doubt that this was indeed an authentic Runabout from Playmates. So thank you for that, Playmates. Yeah, so I mean, I now know, obviously, as you do, that there are no stickers applied to this. So it is plainer than it would otherwise be, because I know that there were supposed to be some stickers here, for example. Although they can't go onto the hatch, they must split it. It should have its registry details kind of here on the warp pylons, the warp outriggers there. So, I mean, yeah, it's it would definitely, and another sticker here as well. So it would definitely benefit from the application of stickers. It does look a little bit plain, but you know, this colour is nice on the side of the nacelles. That's as it should be. So that I think is a nice touch. Let's have a quick look at these compartments before I find some batteries. Now, is this going to be obvious in terms of access, I wonder? How am I supposed to get in? Perhaps I should consult my instruction and actually read the manual. I am actually going to do that because there might well be a little button that I can press. So the front hatch does open from the bottom upwards. Ah, there you are, you see, learn something new over there. There is indeed a hatch release button on the underside of the nose of the aircraft. There you go. There's a little button underneath the nose here, which still isn't helping me overly much. But then if you hadn't been open for many a long decade, you'd probably be struggling to open on first attempt as well. She really doesn't want to go there. Let's try inverting. In fact, let's have a look at the underside, because we haven't actually looked at the underside yet. We probably should have a little look. So you can see there, it's got 3 quite large wheels on the underside to help it maneuver in quote space unquote. But yeah, I mean that's you know, that's nice. So they've added, you know, they've got quite a lot of detail on the underside as well. There's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? I'm getting old and tired. Not nibbling, you know what I mean. little detail. It'll come to me in a minute when I'm not thinking about it. But let's just see if I can. Let's just see if I can pop this open when it's upside down. Because it's obviously a little bit. There we go. A little bit stiff. Now this is very clever. I think I knew about this already. Oof, crunch. Okay, I think it's supposed to go that far. That's good. But look at the detail here. This is very, very clever. They've actually got a little sort of restraint for the pilot. They've left a little bar in here so you can put stickers on the consoles there. But even the little central clasp of the belt is actually a Starfleet insignia, and that is a classic Playmates attention to detail kind of detail, basically. I think personally, that's such a clever little thing to bother to do on a kid's toy. So I've got to hand it to the designer of this particular toy, because that is very, very nice as a concept. So I'm just having it's actually got some stickers on the inside. If I maneuver you in a little bit, you'll probably be able to see them, I think, just. Can you just see that there's a little bit of a window, sort of side window sticker just beyond that strap there. It's rather hard for you to see, I know, but there we go. If I focus in there, so you should be able to see that. So that's a nice detail, because that would be virtually impossible for a child's fingers to get to when you think about it. So that's a very, very sensible thing for them to have done. And they've repeated it on the other side as well, so that the interior, where you wouldn't normally be able to see it, you actually have some chance of having a sort of a detail there without you having to get little tiny fingers in accurately. So that's clever. And so what they've done was they got extra benefit from this by doing the same here. Now I don't know if this has got a similar, it doesn't feel like there's a button there. I think it's probably just got a sort of a clasp at the back. Yeah, so you just do that there. And again, exactly the same approach. I'm wary of pushing that any further back, so I don't want to break it out of the box. But again, exactly the same safety strap detail there on the back as well. So what I'm going to do, two things now. I'm going to A, find a Playmates figure, and B, put some batteries in. Okay, let's have a look at this. Oh. Luke, it's not an X-Wing, Luke. Sorry, let me just try that again, bear with me. Okay, here's Worf I prepared earlier. Ta-ting! Yeah. Okay, so yes, it will indeed fit a standard Playmates figure. And in fact, I don't think Worf here is necessarily the most standard Playmates figure either, but he has fitted in. So they've actually done a rather good job on that, because that's a very, very generous seat for an action figure. So as you can see, I wasn't entirely convinced he was going to fit in there. But he can actually sit quite upright in the seat, and it kind of works. He's even got sort of foot space in front of him as well, so it does work quite nicely. Okay, enough of those hijinks. Let's have a listen and a look at the lights and sounds. Now it has to be said, these are not fully featured, and also not quite sure how well these are sounding, because of course when I opened the battery compartment I discovered poorly old batteries. But fortunately the contacts weren't too far gone. Haven't done any cleaning yet, so this is exactly as they were when I found them. Now this is supposed to be the phaser activation button. This is the wormhole activation button. Phasers. Wormhole. So both sides working very happily, which again for 30-year-old electronics is not a bad effort. So I have to say, I am actually quite impressed with this one. I think this is a classic sort of Playmates representation of an actual Star Trek vehicle as a toy. And on that basis, it does absolutely fine. Is it a bang-on accurate reproduction of a Starfleet Runabout? No, it isn't. But it's pretty close. It's pretty close. And let's put that to one side for a moment and think about this as a toy. This is a big toy. It is, but it's light. But it's also solid. I mean, you know, there's some real presence to that. And I've been very happy with that as a spaceship, you know? It's a good spaceship. You can kind of see what it's supposed to do. It's kind of hard to hang on to, but I think you could probably sort of hold it under a sort of a warp nacelle there, and it would be perfectly happy with you doing that, and then you could sort of swoosh it about like that quite happily, you know? And given that you can't put action figures in any of the other ones that are sort of normal sized, you know, if you think about sort of interaction with other genres, as I've already demonstrated briefly here, this will work for that. You can put mixes and matches of action figures into these cockpits and have your little adventures using a runabout, and it wouldn't look out of place alongside a Star Wars ship, dare I say it, crossing universes there. But you know, you could do that as a kid. That's eminently doable with this. So I think this is probably, you know, a really smart move on Playmates' part, because this would be usable by a lot more kids than would otherwise be the case were it just a spaceship from Star Trek. Do you see what I mean? And you know, these little vessels, Deep Space Nine chewed through them at the rate of knots, and there's actually an episode in which Kira Nerys notes that it's just as well there are lots of rivers on Earth, because they're all named after Earth rivers. And she's quite right, because they do lose a few of them over the course of time. I think there's only one that actually survives from season 1 through to season 7, bless it. Might even be the Rio Grande, actually. So I think it's a lovely ship. It's got a lovely sort of character to it. It was nice to see something that wasn't just a sort of square, boxy shuttlecraft. And I'm looking behind me, and I've got some examples of little Eagle Moss shuttlecraft here. And you know, this was, up to this point, this was the typical Starfleet shuttlecraft that came in a ship. That is pretty much as exciting as it got. Obviously, Voyager kind of took it slightly a step further with something like Delta Flyer. Do you know what? It just occurred to me. Voyager left from Deep Space Nine, right? Bear with me on this one. This is a random thought process, but Voyager left from Deep Space Nine, which means that Voyager started when Deep Space Nine had runabouts. So why, rather than try and create the Delta Flyer much later on in this series' history, why didn't Voyager just create a runabout? Because I think its shuttle bay would have been big enough to do that. They have a design on their databases already for a large, pretty capable mini starship, actually, let alone shuttlecraft. So why didn't they just build a runabout? I wonder if they were worried about it getting confused with Deep Space Nine. And if people saw a runabout on screen, they think they were watching Deep Space Nine, not Voyager, and then kind of turn off. It's possible. It's possible. They might well have thought that people might do that, actually, thinking about it. So yeah, that is possible, I guess. But yeah, I like it. I definitely like it. And as I say, I would have been quite happy picking this up, had one been available. But as I say, I don't know whether this actually got a European release, because I don't think I've ever seen any of these on eBay in the UK. And I'm not sure that I've seen Deep Space Nine on eBay in the UK either. So I get the impression that these perhaps didn't make as much of a European release as many of the other Playmate ships did, which clearly did get sort of French, German translated versions as well. So I don't know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that one, because I don't personally have any other reference source to go by there. But I do kind of wonder about that. And I think my guide for Playmates stuff is exclusively US, but I might have a delve. If I find any more information, I might mention it in the description. But I suspect that, you know, this is the only other Deep Space Nine related item that got released, besides Deep Space Nine itself, and the Defiant, of course, which you've already seen. And of course, this is what happened in the show, is that the Defiant ultimately came along, so that the crew had a slightly bigger starship to play with as against the Runabouts. But don't ignore the fact that the Runabouts went along to back up a Galaxy-class starship in one of the first encounters with the Jem'Hadar. So, you know, they were not being dismissed. They had phasers, they had torpedoes, they had big grown-up torpedoes if they had the weapons pod on top. So, you know, they were really, really capable little starships. The funny thing is, we never saw the crew quarters at the back until the Star Trek Next Generation episode. But what they did do for Deep Space Nine, as I found out earlier on this evening, they actually built a physical scale model of the outside of the nose of the ship. Because I didn't really remember this, but in the earlier episodes of Deep Space Nine, they crashed them so much on planets that they actually built a crashed version with an escape hatch kind of blown out here. Because they do have windows here and they have a hatch here, but they also had this escape hatch. They could kind of blow that out the side if they crashed. And in theory, the front half, front sort of third-ish of the ship here could also detach and form its own little ship, and that could be used as an escape pod. But again, it's like the captain's yacht, we never see it. It's theoretically possible for it to do it because the ship is supposed to be modular, but we never actually see it happen in the series itself. So, fascinating little ship as ancillary ships go. You know, I really enjoyed it when they brought it in, because it made perfect sense for what was effectively a starbase to have its own sort of little defense force of, you know, reasonably capable ships, rather than having to wait for another starship to arrive to back it up, which wouldn't always be available. So, you know, if nothing else, it's more things for the enemy to shoot at, you know. But anyway, yeah, it's a great toy. I like it. So I'll see you again for another one before long. Cheers for now.